Good afternoon all, and welcome to EASL Studio broadcasting live from Vienna, your hepatology broadcast news. I think today is a very special day. Something has been underway from 3 years and is finally here, the global consensus on new nomenclature for NAFLD, now to be steatotic liver disease. So I think I'm very privileged here to have a distinguished faculty with me. Here to the right I have the two co-chairs, Phil Newsom and Marinella from Birmingham and Chicago. They co-chaired it, has been deeply involved in it. And here to the left of me, I have Graciela Castronaro and Mohamed El Casas from Mexico and Cairo, representing Latin America and Africa, being part of the steering committee and deeply involved in this work. And then I have Robert Mitchell-Fain from Liver Patients International. And we have online, maybe we can have a picture of Lorraine Steele from American Liver Foundation, to have the patients' voices. I don't know if we can see here, it doesn't matter, she's here, and again to speak the patients' voices. So what we'll discuss here is to say, so why do we actually need a new nomenclature? How was it done? What is it? What's the consequence, etc. But I think more important, so this is the very launch, the big launch, and the paper is released Saturday, but here's sort of bringing you and the whole community up to speed, what all these people have been doing for the last 3 years. So I guess that's a task of you. You have 30 minutes to bring up to speed for 3 years, so please do that. But I think before I start, I know it has been a massive undertaking. Maybe I can ask you, Maru, so how does it feel to be done?
It feels good. It's been a long, long labor. But no, I think there's still a lot of work to be done, but I'm excited about that for the future.
How about you, Phil? How do you feel? You smile?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's been a lot of work, but it's also been a privilege, I guess, working with the different stakeholders. And it's not by no means the end. I think there's a lot to do as we kind of develop this. And I think the challenge here is that people feel passionately about this, and there's a lot of different views. And I think the challenging thing throughout this has been trying to get that right sort of compromise position that brings together, as most of the stakeholders as possible.
Okay, so are you proud about it?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, maybe over here. So you're also part of the steering committee. How was it to be joining that, Mohammed? How was the work? Was it? I guess
yes. First of all, I'm so pleased to participate in this great work and to represent my region and my continent. And happy that the joint committee included other representatives from other continents. Yeah, this is important. And also on a personal basis, I'm happy to share in this work that will establish a new nomenclature and a new science in fatty liver.
So how about you, Graciela? You enjoyed it?
Yes.
Are you happy it's over?
I am happy because this time is very necessary to create this nomenclature.
Yeah.
It's a new nomenclature.
Okay, so that was the easy part for you guys. So now we need to go into the real matter. So I think maybe I can start with you, Robert, because in the end of the day, this is all about patients. How do we advance patients' care? How do we fight liver diseases? So some people may say that this is causing a trouble, but now we need to think in a new way. But why was it important to change the name?
That's a great question. Why was it important to change the name?
What problems does it solve?
What problems? So, two entirely different questions. There was a time, there was an impetus that started an entire process, and that process has taken us 3 years. And the honest answer would be that that's 3 years of time of NAFLD and NASH experts that could have been spent elsewhere. But we had to do this work, we had to come together, and to be part of such an incredible international community who sometimes toughed it out. We didn't always agree at every moment, and that was an important part of the process. So now that we're here, why is it important? because it makes a difference. When you speak to patients about what they have, you can give them a term that is loaded, or you can give them a term that is neutral. And how that is given to the patient determines their reaction and determines their journey from that diagnosis. And so to have a neutral term now will change the journey for countless patients for generations to come.
Thank you very much. So, Lorraine, I cannot see you. You should be tuning in from California, US. Hi, Lorraine. Good to see you. Welcome. So maybe you can also, from your perspective as a patient's representative, to say, why is this an important change? What problems did it actually, does it solve, or is it intended to solve?
You know, with this growing epidemic of this disease, it was really important to figure out a way to rebrand this disease and really help to reduce the stigma associated with it. You know, I'm really excited. We at the American Liver Foundation are very excited about this nomenclature change, and patients should really embrace it, because it really will be a much more helpful way for them to address their disorder and talk about their disease. And it's very exciting for both patients and for science.
Thank you very much. Maybe back to you, Phil. So how do you think it? So why? So that, I guess you can maybe expand that, but why now? Why not 5 years ago or in 5 years? Why is time now? Why is it important?
So the why, I think, has been touched on, because you have a name which to many people is stigmatizing. To many people it tells them what it isn't rather than what it is. So I think for a long time we've accepted it's a far from decent name. We think back to hepatitis C being called non-A, non-B. So I think that's why we need to change it. I think the why now, I think it's been bubbling around for a couple of years, and then obviously the floating of an alternative name, so metabolic dysfunction associated fatty liver disease, I think that sort of surfaced it, and that sort of provided an impetus for change, because there was another name that was surfaced, which I think had many advantages, but also many shortcomings. And I think that was probably the thing that pushed us to say, right, we need to address this now, and we need to make a change. And I think one of the challenges is that, we strive for perfection, but we aim for good or very good. There is no such thing as perfection here. So we've tried to pick a name which I think is of significant enough improvement and allows us to sort of move forward in a way that, as Robert talked about, we can have those conversations with patients without feeling, the pressures around stigma.
Very good. So maybe you already opened it up, because we also learned another name to know in recent years, the MAFLD. So people may want to know, why not MAFLD? I don't know, Mauro, maybe you can explain why that name didn't fly, or in this global consensus.
Yeah, so I think it's more in the context, in addition to what Phil said, it's more really around the definition of the disease. And the reason why it was a bit problematic is because it had the inclusion of alcohol in the name. And as we know, alcohol significantly accelerates disease in NAFLD. And that, of course, is problematic from a natural history perspective. It could have significant implications for biomarker development and drug development, which would be a shame considering we have new therapeutics on the horizon. So those were kind of the major definition reasons why we felt that it really needed to be evaluated broadly. And of course, it's easier to bring together a group of people that agree, unanimously, right? It's easy to find your friends and say, this is what I like to call it. What do you think? But I think what was a bigger challenge, which is what we tried to do, is to really bring a diversity of stakeholders, and that will be reflected in some of the level of consensus that we achieved on some things. I think is reflective of the diversity of opinion that we included on purpose. So.
Thank you. So we ended up with steatotic liver disease. We will later have the slide, what it actually means and how it's defined. But I think it's fair also to let you know, how did we get there? It was not just you guys, etc. I don't know, Mohammed, you were part of the steering committee. Can you say a few words of how was the process, a 3-year-long process? You don't need to walk us through every little step, but maybe a little bit the structure. How does it actually, because this is very important with the legitimacy.
Yes.
How do we actually legitimize that this is something that's actually really covering the world, and we get back to how it will impact the way we see and handle patients, etc. But a little bit about the process.
Yes. Actually, it was a very lengthy process. I think we started 3 years ago with 6 groups. I was one of the histopathology group, and then we have some consensus that was used to draft the first documents for the Delphi, then 4 rounds of Delphi methods with 2 hybrid meetings within the DDW and ASLD. Yes, actually, it's a lengthy process, but I think this could guarantee accuracy and credibility for the work.
Okay, yeah, we will stay a little bit in that, but I think maybe for you, Graciela, I guess we all the time learn something, but what was the most important learning from you during the process? Because what is basically the takeaway through difficult things where we want to make big change?
For me, the Span Society Union has been fantastic because this reflects discipline, transparency, commitment, and inclusion for the benefit of global health. I'm convinced that this movement will also have an impact, improvements in public health policies. And so today, finally, for almost 3 years of work, I can say I can have greatly appreciated this process.
Maybe as a co-chair, Mauro, can you give a little bit more detail in how was actually the structure? Again, we don't need a half-hour lecture, but more understanding how you actually compose these different groups and all these hundreds of people involved.
Right, so the way we structured it was based on participation member size as an association member size, and we created proportions and then asked the societies to nominate their own individuals. From there, as Mohammed mentioned, we divided the steering committee, which is about 34 people, into 6 working groups. Each working group was tasked to address a specific question that was contentious or needed to be further clarified, and then the draft statements were emerged and then were evolved over the process of 4 rounds with 2 in-person meetings, as we mentioned. Those statements evolved over time in response to the comments that we received, which were about 3,000 in aggregate. And we dropped, added, depending on those comments that we received and the in-person feedback. And it was a lengthy process. We had a methodologist, of course, Jeff Lazarus and his team, and Cooney, who did a wonderful job with the methodology for this, because it's quite complex, actually.
Oh, thank you very much. And maybe back to you, Robert. So were the patients' voices heard, and were the patients represented in all this?
They were. And the patients didn't even agree. But I think it was, we were included in the conversations. We were incorporated into some of the more robust moments of the conversation. And I think there was a genuine interaction. And you asked a question earlier, what did you learn in this process? And I think for me personally, the biggest takeaway from me was how much the stakeholders have genuinely collaborated to produce the best possible results. And so absolutely, as a patient advocate and knowing all the other patient advocates that were involved, yes, we were.
Very good. So maybe over to you, Lorraine, because I know you've been watching this a bit from the side, and now you lead the biggest American liver patients association. So many of us have seen it from the sidelines. How does it look from you from outside, from a patient perspective?
Sure, yes, and we had quite a few patients in the United States involved in the process. And, change is hard. And, Robert was, I agree Robert's comment, that people didn't always agree, the patients didn't always agree. But, going through the process, I think was really important. I applaud the leadership in pulling together this whole process. And, patients in the end, I feel are going to embrace the change. They are going to understand that this is in their best interest as patients. It will enhance care as it relates to this disease, and ultimately it really will eliminate some challenges associated with the disease, most namely stigma. So
Okay, yeah, Phil?
it was great to have that volunteer patient perspective and involvement.
So to me, I think one of the key bits was that there were some very clear entrenched views, and the Delphi process to a certain extent addresses that. But a key step for me was the sort of 2-day face-to-face meeting we had in Chicago last year. And I think that really allowed people to soften their views and move towards a kind of compromise position. And I think that, again, that was an invaluable step in that process, because people have got really strong views on this topic. And I think that to me really was a step change.
I agree.
Okay, very good. Yeah.
So just to add to that, if I may, so I know that you both chaired this entire process, but I think what's a key takeaway from that 2-day meeting in Chicago was that it was independently facilitated. So you were part of the throng, and actually it was somebody completely separate who led that process, who asked the difficult questions, who asked the easy questions, to actually bring us together to soften our views. And I think that's a really important highlight that's part of the process that might not be taken on board.
Oh, that's very good. So I guess we covered why we need it now, why we choose something different from MAFLD, and we covered how it was done, part of the process. Of course, this is outlined massively in the paper. So anybody want to see what the child looked like? What are you saying out there? I think we can... So this is, I think, the slide that sort of show the overall concept. I think I'll start with you, Mauro. If you walk us through it slowly, you spent 3 years on this. Nobody have seen it before. So how do we explain this? The steatotic liver disease we get, but how should we think it? Can you walk us through it?
Yeah, so there was actually a very significant majority that wanted an umbrella term, that wanted an overarching term. And the reason for that is because there are, of course, many different causes for steatosis in the liver. And the way NAFLD is structured, it really doesn't specifically separate things out. And so we thought that this would be important to incorporate new knowledge in the future. That was sort of the basic premise of it. And also elevate and recognize more that alcohol, of course, is an important contributor. So where we ended with steatotic liver disease is the overarching term, largely to avoid stigma. This did have a majority vote, but it also was to avoid stigma predominantly. With respect to the term that we would refer to as NAFLD now, it would be metabolic dysfunction-associated steatotic liver disease, and we'll go through the definition in just a moment, I think. Are we? Or no?
Or I think the deep dive, I think it's better to do that in the Sympo Starter. So this is sort of the opening up. What are sort of the main categories, etc., and then we can go into that. But
perfect. But basically, it just operationalizes what you would do anyway. It's nothing terribly shocking, which you'll hear about it all on Saturday. But I think one of the most exciting things is that recognition of this group of patients that has MASL but also has moderate alcohol use. This is a group of patients that is not included in clinical trials, that doesn't really have a home, really not drinking enough alcohol to really be considered just straight ALD. And so we thought that this would be an important group to address separately. And again, this was highly consensual in the process. I think it's anywhere from about 78 to 90%, depending on the type of question, agree that this should be a separate category. And then we provide just a broad range of intake, of course, because everybody has a different susceptibility to alcohol, and so on and so forth, which we cannot ascertain yet without proper biomarkers. So that's the basics of the new.
No, that's a very good start. I think, Phil, would you add anything, or at this stage, and I guess we can, maybe you can explain why we have these two different slides here.
Well, if I could maybe just go back. So steatotic liver disease, I think, to put it into context, we spent probably a good couple of hours asking people to come up with different names to describe that. And that was a sort of a brainstorming exercise followed by, taking forward the top couple and then voting on them. So that's how we got to it. And I think one of the challenges that we kind of wrestle with is using medical terminology and then how that's used, as patients having those conversations. So I think, a lot of time was spent on that. And I think you were probably the best, most articulate advocate of that, Robert, in terms of, perhaps you want to just touch on.
No, absolutely. So again, this goes back to the patient experience. So you have osteoporosis. Well, what's that? You have primary biliary cholangitis. Well, what's that? You have steatotic liver disease. Well, what's that? And so it allows the patient to have a completely neutral perception of what they have, so they can then listen to what the clinician has to say to them. And it was absolutely key to take away any of kind of emotional reaction, because it's really easy for patients to respond with the emotional part of their brain to any diagnosis, which then leads to an inappropriate response in terms of your fight-flight response and all of these kind of things, which doesn't help the patient in their journey. So to have a neutral term which allows the patient to question that, what does that mean? What does that mean for me? Let's have that conversation. I think was absolutely key.
Thank you very much. Maybe also, Mohammed, would you have something to add to say? Is it, I don't know, is this complex, or how do you see it? We will come back to what this means for the clinics and drug development, biomarkers, etc. But it's just that we convey that this is it, and maybe explain if you have any comments. Otherwise, it's just fine.
Yeah, again, having an overarching term, I think would allow for accommodating further understanding to the disease pathophysiology, to the biomarkers. So having a large term, in my opinion, was a very important issue to adjust for everything after that. Also, the issue of separating alcohol consumption and to have the overlap with the mild or moderate alcohol consumption, I think is important also, because a lot of patients having this category with mild overlying alcohol or moderate alcohol consumption, and this group of patients are not well investigated, and we don't have much about them, which for sure could impact the progression and the outcome of their liver diseases.
Absolutely, absolutely. So maybe we got the other one here. So Phil, could you just explain why we have this in gray and not in green? And what does it actually mean? That we should not open up for this. These are, let's say, the smaller boxes. The big boxes are the green ones. And before, when you think about it, I just want to pick on one thing you said there, Mohammed, because I think it's really an important thing. And personally, as a researcher, as a clinician, this way, what you say, that we see patients over a spectrum of disease. So people and also biology unfolds on the spectrum. It's not really boxes. So this way of seeing these things, where you can have different weights of different drivers, alcohol or metabolic components, etc., I think resonates very well with at least the way I see my patients. But Phil, back to you with the boxes there.
Yes, I think the point is that, with the exception of the group of patients that have metabolic features and alcohol intake, all those other conditions have always existed. And what we've done really here is just put them under the category of steatotic liver disease. So in that sense, it's just an organizational exercise for those of them. The second thing is, and I think just to touch on with the alcohol bit, is recognizing we like to categorize things, but in reality, things are a spectrum. And of course, patients can move up and down that spectrum over their life course. So as you can see there, within that combination group that have the metabolic features and alcohol intake that's higher than is currently accepted, within that, people at one end might be more metabolic predominant and ALD predominant. So, that's something that we'll need to work through, and that's the opportunity to generate new data. But it captures the reality. The other point to make is that this doesn't change in any way or form the way we grade severity. So for example, the way we grade fibrosis and the use of non-invasive criteria is entirely unchanged, other than providing us a real opportunity to deal with a group of patients that are being excluded. So those patients that have metabolic features and alcohol at the moment have nowhere to go. They don't fit into trials. We don't know what to do with treatment. So this is a real opportunity. And lots of people fall into that category.
No, I fully agree. Maybe before we go on to the consequences, a comment from you, Lorraine, there online. So from your perspective, having seen this, I guess more or less for the first time, does it look frightening, or complex, or how does it? We all need to digest it and learn to live with it. But are you scared? Probably not.
I think it's a tremendous opportunity for our community and particularly for patients. And I'm so convinced that the time is now you know, globally, we had such changes with COVID, and, you know, steatotic liver disease, it's on the rise. It's affecting billions of patients across the world. And, you know, the time is now to make this radical change in the hopes that it fuels innovation. It needs to. Patients are counting on us, and again, I applaud the group who, you know, really worked on this over 3 years. We're ready, and I think very positive activities for patients is going to emerge.
Okay, thank you. So now we have a new name, we have a new definition, we have new ways, but we need to consider what are the consequences. This is not something let's say you just do for free. So I think it's really important that we discuss what does this means in terms of managing patients, diagnosing. Maybe I can start a little top line with you, Graciela. So what impact do you think this nomenclature will have in Latin America? Again, we are different continents, but from your perspective, how do you think that will impact what you do?
Definitely, the impact will be very positive. It will benefit patients, civil society, and doctors. Patients and civil society will benefit because awareness of the disease will increase and stigma will be gone. The doctors will benefit from better characterization of the disease, and therefore an improvement in treatments and outcomes. The change is good, the nomenclature is good, so therefore the change of nomenclature enriches.
Thank you very much. So you touched upon a very important point we discuss all the time, because these patients are not in our hospital, they're largely out in the community, etc. So awareness, I think, is very important. So Robert, how do you think will this impact awareness when we suddenly come out with a new name of something we still been banging for a long time, or is this an opportunity to communicate in a new way? How do you see it?
So many opportunities, so many opportunities. When you look at those branches, so first off, I think it's a real opportunity for clinicians to practice personalized healthcare, because as patients move along that spectrum, the clinician is encouraged to be a clinician, to do the great things that we need you to do. But also, and you know, I come from a previous name change in another condition, and again, there was fear, there was uncertainty, but actually the opportunity to talk about the change, to talk about what this means, to raise awareness that people had never even heard of the stigmatized name, but there's this thing, and it's steatotic liver disease, and you need to know about it, and this is why. And so you have so many opportunities to raise that awareness, to raise those conversations, and to start to bring the bigger picture solutions that this entire population needs.
Okay. Maybe over to you, Mauro, then. So when I go back next week and see my patients again, let's say diagnosis, treatment, follow-up, what will this change for my approach to patients relative to what I do today?
I think the conversation is not going to change much appreciably. I think the focus will be more on the why. There's fat in the liver, steatosis donor on imaging or whatnot. And I think one of the reasons why this may actually help risk stratification in the future is it really brings to the forefront the sort of the root cause of the disease and the things that increase the risk for disease progression. And so hopefully we'll stop seeing patients that have present with cirrhosis or decompensated liver disease saying, well, I've been followed by my doctor for 20 years and he said I just had fatty liver. And so hopefully this is an opportunity, again, to reframe, talk about the cardiometabolic risk that drives the disease, and talk about how to modify the disease based on those risk factors.
So relatively to the diagnostic tools I use today, should I change anything?
No, I don't think so. I think the approach for risk stratification would be exactly the same as it is today. It's really, the approach is no different. It's really just the conversation and more of an emphasis on the causative factors. I think that's the change. So.
Very good. So of course, we need to discuss this much more. How do we actually implement, have the uptake in practice? But I think another thing which is you see all over at this meeting, there are hundreds of abstracts around this disease that now has a new name, but also a wide range of drug development. Maybe over to you, Phil. So can you sort of change the name and definition in the middle of a big drug development journey? How will this impact the drug development?
So we spent a lot of time thinking about that, and the short answer is it will have no negative effects on drug development, because if we looked at the definition on the litmus and the NIMBLE consortia, and there's 98% overlap. So, and that doesn't even include the patients in trials. So the reality is the patients that are going into trials are exactly the same patients. This has no impact on that other than to increase awareness and increase patients coming forward. I think the real opportunity, will be also opening up a whole new area of research on people that have that overlap, that combination of alcohol and NAFLD, which is where many patients are.
So basically an opportunity to actually widen the window of where these drugs potentially to be effective. And I guess in the end of the day, we don't approve drugs. The agencies do that, and they improve it for certain indication, and that's how we should see it. So I agree that I don't believe that it will, on the contrary, the opportunity here really to speak up and expand the spectrum and see patients as they actually are out there makes very sense. But then another thing, we change something. There's so many. We always discuss the need for biomarkers to identify these patients, know who's at risk. There's a lot of work done there. But again, will this destroy all this work has done? Regarding biomarkers, Mauro?
No, it shouldn't. I think it opens the arena for the sort of determination of the accuracy and performance of biomarkers in this particular subgroup, which is largely excluded. So I think it actually opens a new area that I think is promising, and it's quite frankly reality for a lot of people. So.
Very good, very good. So we are approaching an end, but I just want to have around now to understand two things. So this is, the child looks nice. I think we got good argument why we should have it, that it was done in a compelling way, and the impact is actually largely positive. But if you could just give me 1 point, each of you, what is the most important win with the new nomenclature? Say, okay, this is a really important step forward. Just one thing. I don't know, who want to give a go? Lorraine, now you popped out on the screen there. What do you think is the most important, just single thing with this new thing that said, okay, I can really see that this will improve, I don't want to give you example, but patients care a long time, it solve problems with this or that, or...
Yes, well, I agree with everyone. This is a huge opportunity. And I would say that the single most important element, or a single most important element coming out of this, is that the liver is a misunderstood organ. And this is going to give us a real opportunity to educate on what this amazing organ does. And I see conversations across the world between medical professionals and patients, and it's really exciting that we have this opportunity to share the importance of this organ and what this nomenclature change means.
Thank you very much. Maybe over to you, Mohammed. So if you can pick 1 or 2 things, which is really the key step forward with this new thing?
Yeah, I think it's a new beginning for studying a disease with a nomenclature that is related mainly to the pathogenesis and the mechanisms rather than the histology or histopathological spectrum. I think it's a new start for new research in this area.
Very good. Graciela, what is your favorite win for this one?
My favorite win is all. It's the patients, it's the doctors, the civil society, because I think in the future this disease will decrease for better awareness, for better treatments, investigation, and better outcomes.
So I'm actually happy that you cannot stick with one. So what about you guys who've been so deep embedded in it? I hope you can find some.
No, there are many good things, but I would say the one, I think that the best thing for me has been to learn from people of very different viewpoints. And I personally changed a little bit actually through this process, and I think that I saw others change as well. And we sort of moved towards each other, and I thought that was very powerful. And So I'm thankful for everybody who participated in it.
I mean, a lot of the things have been said. I think for me, probably the critical thing is that we now have a name and definition that actually captures what the condition is and what causes it rather than what doesn't.
So positive, non-stigmatizing definition. I guess
Absolutely.
solving some of the problems we discussed there in the end. So, but otherwise, unless you have Robert, what do you?
I
from a
have
patient
2 wins.
only 2. That's it.
Only 2. So the first one is when you look at those branches, when you look at that second branch along, we looked long and hard at alcohol-associated steatotic liver disease. But apparently those initials were taken. So we decided that ASLD wasn't going to be the answer for that particular branch. But on a more serious note, I think when you look at the olden days where medicine was done at patients, and then it was being done to patients, I think this entire process has an exemplification of how medicine can be done with patients. And I think for me that's the biggest win, that we as a group of stakeholders have genuinely come together and collaborated in a thing that isn't perfect, but in a way that we can all accept and move forward.
Okay, thank you very much. And then I think I'll end it here, and thank you very much. And I think it's great to have people from 4 continents and all these people coming together for this course. So we are not done yet. We have this important symposium again Saturday 9:55 up here, and where we will hear it a little more in detail. At the same time, the publication, I'll urge you all to download it, read it into detail, then you can have all the logics, and we will have plenty of time for discussion. Before I wind up, I'll just show you one last slide, which I think is also good news for...
And the paper will be Saturday, by the way, right?
Saturday. So already 60 organizations, global, national, regional, has endorsed and support the nomenclature. So I think this is really great news that the whole world is coming together to support this, so we can have meaningful and fast change and update. And I hope you can recognize your local or national organization there. But again, it's continuous dialogue. Otherwise, thank you very much for your attention. But remember to tune in this afternoon for the EASL Studio Sundowners, where we're discussing highlights from the Congress around PBC. Thank you very much.